And I know I've done pretty much all of these.
Welcome everyone to another amazing episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Unfortunately, my job as the person that does the intro is getting outsourced today to AI. And to handle that, our computer friend Andrew.
What's up, fish degenerates? Welcome back to the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast, where the vibes are unhinged, the riz is max, and we're skibbity eating our way straight into that Giga Chad fishing meta. No skill, diff, no cap. It's your boy Andrew, the ultimate CEO of Cringe, and we're about to hit that fishing grind set on some next level brain rot today. Think goblin mode, but for fishing. Whether you're out here full EP, mewing at the water, or just trying to flex on some baby minnows, we got that heat to turn you from low tier bozo to absolute king of the lake. So grab your rods, vibe check your tackle, and let's get jiggy with it. Big fish energy only. We ain't catching no L's today. Let's go, fam!
So what was that like? Literally Gen Z introduction.
I was like, yeah, like I asked AI to generate an introduction using the cringiest, most up-to-date slang possible. There's a few different options. That was one of them, but they're all terrible.
I don't think I've ever wanted to say this, but I'm glad that I'm a millennial.
Oh, thank goodness.
That was pretty cringe. But was that the only one you had?
No, I have another one if you want.
Okay, let's try one more.
Okay. Yo, fish squad. Welcome back to the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast, where we keep it drippy, skibbity dopamine overload all day, every day. It's your boy Andrew coming in hot with that ultimate NPC energy to get you catching them big boy fish. No skill issue here, fam. We're going turbo cringe, the sussiest tips to make you the giga brain of the lake. Whether you're out here full sending, chasing them sigma fish, or just trying to pull a dub while mewing your way through the water, we got the bussin' knowledge you need to pop off. So let's get weird. Grab your rods and let's get schmoovin'. Time to clown on these fish. For real. Let's go.
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you though, if you look at the analytics on this podcast, most of the people that listen to this are between the ages of 25 and 40. So probably most of those people have no idea what you said. I'm actually very proud that I don't know what you just said.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't know what I read, so I'm hoping none of it's like bad.
So anyway, let's just go back to having a regular introduction. Welcome to the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, and with us today, we have the man with the mustache, Andrew.
Hello, y'all.
I thought he was going to say, I'm skibbity. I don't know what that means.
No, I'm done with that.
We have a very interesting episode today. I thought because the last 2 weeks, we were talking with, the awesome fishing guide, Bobby Belmonte. Got a lot of tips. Got a lot of you guys sending us messages saying that you absolutely love the episode, which, I mean, I wasn't surprised because I absolutely love the episode. I learned a lot. A lot of people were sending me messages and like, hey, I tried that thing on the podcast and I caught a fish and they sent me a picture. I love that. So if you guys ever really enjoy an episode or you benefited and caught some fish using information that, we shared, definitely send us a message. We love seeing those. It's amazing. It's like, when someone shows you a picture of their kid, terrible. But when I see pictures of fish, absolutely love it. So I thought today, because we got so in depth with all the professional stuff, we'd have more of a chill episode today. See, chill, that's more of a millennial word. Maybe even older.
It's not.
Okay, never mind. Anyway, so I thought today we could have an episode, and Andrew does not know what this is about because I didn't want to ruin it for him. This one is all about fishing friend fails. All right, y'all. I'm gonna peace out right now. I can't handle the absolute bus Jess is about to throw me under for this episode. So anyway, we're going to go through 10 different things that your fishing friend can do, your fishing buddy can do that can either ruin your trip, annoy the heck out of you, or cause you a lot of anguish and despair. So before we get into that, because this is going to be a really great episode, we actually have an interesting fishing fact. And to handle that, we have the man with the skibbity mustache, Andrew.
Oh, please don't ever call it that again. It's the Magnum PI mustache. I wish. Anyways, something that could ruin a camping trip, or at least put like a damper on it. Actually, I'll ask Jesse, what do you think, what do you want to encounter in the water least, besides snapping turtles? What's something that you don't want to encounter in the water?
Like, am I swimming in the water?
Yeah.
So number one, snapping turtles. Number two, probably leeches.
Bingo.
Oh.
You have a third? I'm curious now.
Third would be, that musky that that lives up in that lake that attacked like 2 people, and they think it's the same one because it's like has a thirst for blood now. That one. But honestly, though, snapping turtles are terrifying. But as long as I know where they are, I'm chill. But leeches they're just
yeah,
gross.
Leeches
Not
are
interesting.
creepy.
Yeah.
I have some fun facts about leeches.
Oh,
So
great.
we're gonna be haunting your nights with this information for the next little bit. First of all, some general stuff about them. Leeches are segmented worms from the subclass Hirudinea. I'm not going to say that word again. I don't even know if I said it correctly the first time. But interesting, they're classified as worms. There are over 700 species worldwide, different species of leeches. Most live in freshwater, but some are marine, which is saltwater, or terrestrial, which
Ew.
it kind of took me by surprise. But I'm like, that's just even worse. Now they're on land.
So there's nowhere you can escape from these
No,
things.
literally, they're all over.
At least they don't fly.
They range in size from a few millimeters long to nearly a foot. Not all leeches, though, are bloodsuckers. Many are just scavengers or they're actual predators, but they're not blood-sucking leeches. Some of the ones that we have local to Ontario and kind of Canada is the northern blood-sucking leech. I'll give you one guess as to whether or not that is a blood-sucking leech or not.
I would say yes.
It's a non-biting leech,
What?
and it feeds on small aquatic animals.
Makes sense.
A couple little facts about that leech there. Its lifespan is about 2 to 3 years. It lives up to it can grow up to 10 centimeters or 4 inches long. And yeah, so it primarily feeds on small aquatic animals like worms and snails. That's what it's going to attach to. Another one that we have in Canada is the horse leech. This again is a non-blood sucking leech. It preys on insects, tadpoles, and other leeches. That one there can grow up to about 15 centimeters or 6 inches. They live to be about 3 to 5 years. Another interesting one that I didn't know we had in Canada is the medicinal leech. It was introduced, it wasn't here all the time, but it was historically used in bloodletting back in the day. And that's kind of a whole other interesting thing about what they used to use them for. But medicinal leeches are actually still used today, but we'll get into that in a little bit. They can live between 5 to 10 years in captivity because doctors actually have them in the hospital, or 2 to 5 years in the wild, and they grow 5 to 12 centimeters long, or about 2 to 5 inches. The next one is the fish leech. It parasitizes fish, attaching to the fins or the gills. You and I have seen these, and we've wondered, like, what are these things? It's like, is this microscopic lamprey or something like that? Because you'll see these little like tags like hanging off of the fish skin or fish fins. But they only grow between 1 to 3 centimeters, or like 0.4 to 1.2 inches long. And they will attach, like I said, to the fins or the gills of the fish. You'll see these little guys just hanging off a fish. Again, they don't touch humans at all. They don't attach to them. And I guess you're wondering, all right, well, what about the leech that I hate finding on my body when it attaches to me? That is called the brown leech. Very common in Ontario, and it has distinctive orange spots. When you look at it, it has like little orange spots on it. And that one there, they can live 3 to 4 years and grow between 2 to 4 inches, and very commonly found in lakes and ponds across Ontario and all over the world, especially in North America. What about some leech facts? Those are the ones we experience. Now, what about something that is, these different things are actually, a lot of these are part of the leech's anatomy, and it carries across all the different species of leeches. So first of all, leeches have 3 jaws with hundreds of teeth, and they secrete an anticoagulating hirudin, or serum, essentially. And so those jaws, when they attach, you look at the bottom side of a leech, it has looks like a small triangle almost, and that is its 3 jaws. They can move like a caterpillar on land, or they'll swim like undulating their body through the water. They're actually really quick. Leeches have been used in stuff like medicine for over 2,500 years, but especially in the 19th century. They're still used today, oftentimes in reconstructive surgery, because it will improve the blood flow to those areas. So like stuff like on your face, and they do reconstructive surgery, they'll put leeches there because it allows the blood to flow and rush to those areas of your body. And again, because they release that anticoagulant, it will actually won't start scabbing over and stuff on your face. It'll keep the blood flowing.
That's funny because it seems like such an old medieval thing to do. But I don't even know. I went down the rabbit hole on YouTube one time. And you know that show Botched, where it's like a bunch of plastic surgeons that like fix terrible old plastic surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady got something done on her face, like a nose job or something. And they literally were putting leeches on her face. And I was like, what the heck? This is like a fancy, like, Hollywood, Beverly Hills plastic surgery place. And they're using leeches. I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah. Another fun fact is leeches are more, not professional. They've achieved more than you and I ever will in our lives, Jesse. Because in 2003, leeches went to space. Scientists sent them there in order to study the blood-sucking behavior in zero gravity. Fun fact, they have zero problem doing so in zero gravity.
That just sounds like a huge waste of money.
Most of the things they do in space is a waste of money. There's a few different things. Talking about using leeches for things, we talked about medicine, but there are a few other uses or activities that people do with leeches, which I thought were interesting. There's leech farming. So again, they'll actually have ponds and stuff. And in the 19th century, how they would collect the leeches is they would just walk into the pond with bare legs. It's like, yes, when I imagine having that job, it's like, yeah, I'm the leech collector. And you just kind of like strip down from the waist down and just walk into scummy old ponds and let leeches bite you.
At least they aren't piranha collectors.
Leeches in the past in some parts of Russia were used for fortune telling and detecting lies. I have no clue how that worked, but I don't believe that it works. A really interesting one, which I think we should participate in, Jesse. It's historically held in Eastern Europe, and it's leech spitting contests.
I'm good. I'll watch.
Yeah, on second thought, I agree with you. Okay, we're going to avoid spitting leeches then. But you might think, okay, what are leeches for? They're just bloodsuckers, but we already learned a lot of them aren't bloodsuckers, at least not on humans. Now, they play a very crucial role in the ecosystems because they are both predators, but they're also a huge source of being prey. So you think of like walleye fishing, using leeches for walleye is something that's been done for years, for decades, and they work really well. And because they're so rubbery, it's a lot, they last longer than a worm on a hook. But they also help control the insect populations because as a predator, a lot of these species will eat the larval insects that are in the water and whatnot. Another cool thing about them, we might look at a lake that doesn't have any leeches and we're like, that's where I want to swim. But actually, a lake that can support a healthy population of leeches is actually a healthier body of water. They can be quite susceptible to pollution in the water, so they're a good indicator of the water quality. So if you're fishing a place where you don't see any leeches, you've never had a leech, maybe it's because it's polluted. Not always, but maybe it's because it's polluted. One last thing I want to talk about is, of course, it's the Average Ontario Anglers podcast. We're going to talk about some crazy thing, whatnot. Leeches themselves are nuts, and they're crazy, and they're creepy. But what about the largest leech in the world? Guess where it lives?
The Amazon.
Giant Amazon leech. So it's found in South America. It can grow up to 45 centimeters, or 18 inches long, and has a diameter of about 10 centimeters, or 4 inches. Like, that's thick. Like, that's like 4 inches of a diameter of it.
That's like a Red Bull can.
It's 18 inches long. That's not when it's stretched out either. So they really expand like super long when they reach out. That's not stretched out at 18 inches. So it can almost double in length. Now, the giant Amazon leech was first discovered in the 19th century and then disappeared from records. They thought it was completely extinct until the 1970s. They rediscovered it. And how this thing feeds, unlike most other leeches where they have, again, it does have 3 jaws. And you think of leeches when we have them on us and it kind of, latches on, it suction cups on, and it cuts into our skin with those jaws. This thing has a large proboscis, which is basically a mosquito has a proboscis. So this thing extends a proboscis from its mouth and injects it into the skin and feeds on its blood. So this is a blood-sucking leech. And it is also the largest in the world. And I just want to say a quick thank you to the fact that it's not here in Ontario. Sorry to any listeners in South America living around the Amazon basin. I wish you all the best in avoiding this creature.
That's very interesting. And to talk about listeners in different areas. I don't know if you guys remember a few weeks ago, I think it was probably 3-4 weeks ago, we kind of went through a list of all over the world where we have listeners. And I made some remark about, oh yeah, every single week there's some random guy or girl in Zimbabwe that listens to the podcast. The guy actually messaged me on Instagram. He's like, hey, that's me. So I'm looking. So I said to him, send us a short message. We'll read it on the podcast. So he says, his name is Neil. And he says, greetings from Zimbabwe to the Average Ontario Anglers podcast. Love listening to the podcast, even all the way over here. So we really appreciate Neil listening all the way from Zimbabwe. So we appreciate that. And hopefully there aren't massive leeches. But, you know, it's Zimbabwe. So it sounds like there probably is a lot of leeches out there.
I'd like to task Neil with a job. Get us our second Zimbabwean listener.
Yes.
Spread word of mouth. Get someone else from Zimbabwe listening.
So anyway, this podcast, to get back onto the main topic, is called Fishing Friend Fails. Now, I know you're probably listening to this, and if you have a fishing buddy that you go fishing with all the time, just like me and Andrew fish together most of the time, they probably do one of these things to make you infuriatingly mad regularly. So we're going to talk through some of these things. There's 10 things, and we're going to talk about each one. And some of them are going to be tips on how to avoid doing these things. So you may be doing these things without even thinking, and maybe your fishing buddy is just too polite to say anything. I'm going to ask Andrew to name me a few things that he thinks are on this list. What do you think the top 2 are?
Botching a net job.
Yep, that's number 2.
That's got to be on
That's
there.
number 2.
Fishing in where you don't want to fish, like fishing all the wrong spots.
I can see that, but that's not on the list.
Wanting to troll all the time. Because I know that bugs you. Specifically, that bugs
me.
Jesse.
Yeah. Actually, I put up a poll on Instagram. That was one of the ones that someone commented. So we're going to go through the list now. So number 1 is being late. That drives most people mad. Number 2 is botching a net job. Terrible. Number 3 is breaking your fishing gear. Number 4, borrowing and losing lures. 5 is stealing fish, like a fishing opportunity. Okay. 6 is being a cheapskate. Number 7, Andrew might relate to this one. Bathroom emergencies.
Not that much. I'm relating to pretty much all of these so far, and I know I've done pretty much all of these.
We're going to find out. Number 8 is being a useless launch loser. So not helping your buddy when he's launching or bringing his boat back in. Number 9, you may annoy your fishing buddy if you don't pack food, water, sunscreen, necessities like that. And number 10 is casting curses or line crossing and bad casting practices. So we're going to get into a little bit of each of these, and we're going to talk about some of our own experiences and some things that you can do to not do these things. So the first one is being late. Now, like I mentioned, I did put up a question and answer on our Instagram, and I said, what is one thing that your fishing buddy can do that ruins your trip? And I'd say, like, of the 30 or 40 comments that we got in, at least 15 or 20 were people being late or people canceling last minute. I looked up some information on the interweb, on the internet, and I said, how not to be late. So if you're someone that is late, and I'm talking like when me and Andrew go fishing, usually we're going to drive far. So I'm like, I will pick you up at 5 a.m. or like 4:45, or sometimes when we're ice fishing, it's like 3:30 in the morning, right? So I'm always fearful myself. I can't sleep that night anyway, because I'm excited. I'm going to go fishing the next day, but I know I have to sleep. So I'm paranoid. I set so many alarms. Like what are some things that you do, Andrew, so that you don't be late?
Yeah. Instead of one alarm that just kind of repeats every 5 minutes as I hit snooze, I set multiple alarms 5 minutes apart, so that if by chance I press the wrong button on the first snooze, and I try not to snooze on those fishing days. I do all the time for work, not for fishing. But yeah, I'll set multiple alarms just to make sure that if I mess up one alarm, I know the next one will get me up too. And sometimes I'll even put my phone like further away, so I have to kind of move more to get it. I'll move my charger to the other side of the end table, so I actually have to roll over in bed to reach it.
All these are good tips. We're going to get into some more tips. So number 1 of how not to be late for a fishing trip. Now you may think, I'm never late. I'm always excited. You're probably young. So once you get a little older, it gets significantly harder to get out of bed in the morning, especially if you work full time. And I hear when you get really older, it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning. So here's one thing you can do. Now, number 1, planning is big, wouldn't you say? If you have a fishing trip the next day, the worst time to pack up all your gear is like just before you go to bed. Because like for me, it depends what we're doing. Like I need at least an hour to get my gear together and like pack the things I want and get everything ready and pack a lunch and all that stuff. You don't want to put that off to, like really late. So prioritize your sleep as well. You don't want to be like partying the night before. I know a lot of people do that. They'll be like, I didn't sleep at all last night. It's like, great. You're not going to have a good day fishing, are you? Or you're going to be hungover. So don't drink heavily the night before. Bad. So pack early and not the last minute. So I've done this. We've all done this. We're busy, like I said, and you get home late and you're like, I have to wake up at 4:00 in the morning tomorrow. And you're packing all your fishing stuff and making your lunch. And it's like 12:30 in the morning. And you're like, I might get 2 hours of sleep. So I would try my best to pack earlier in the day if possible, or even the day before, and just have everything ready to go. Because that's the last thing you want to do is like, oh man, I need to put fishing line on this reel, or I got to run to the store and grab this. And you can't get it in the morning because everything's closed. And you can't get it at night because everything's closed. So definitely you have to do it early, wouldn't you say, Andrew?
Absolutely. And another thing too I'd mention is if you are putting it off till the evening before, I can attest on the many times that I have done so, is I sit in bed and I can't fall asleep because my mind's going over and rerunning over all the stuff, making sure I have everything ready to go. And then I remember other things. Okay, I gotta, set up, put a note on my phone. I gotta put this by the front door tomorrow to grab it. I forgot this. If you do that the day before or the morning before you go to work or something like that, wherever you want to do it, at least then you have like all day to be thinking of those things. And then when you get home, you just do your last minute stuff. Then you go to bed and you don't have to worry about, trying to remember all that stuff again.
It's true. And you mentioned one thing that I wrote down here is pack early, not last minute, but leave everything by the door. So that's what I do. I pack everything. I have my tackle boxes, my rods, my lunch bag I leave in the kitchen, but everything is at the door. I look at it. I have everything. I have my coat there. I have my boots, like everything I need. So I can look at it visually and be like, okay, that's everything. It's there. It's not somewhere where I've had many days where like I'll forget my fish finder because it was on the table and not by the door. And I just threw everything in the wagon and just went outside and forgot it. You're like, I forgot my fish finder. And then your day's like ruined. You're like, no, I don't know where I'm going to fish, So if everything's by the door, it significantly helps you remember everything. Andrew said he sets many alarms. Now I go a little bit beyond this because I'm a guy that likes sleeping. I love sleeping. I hate getting up early. I'll do it, of course, but I don't just set one alarm. So I have my phone with multiple alarms on it. I have my smartwatch with multiple alarms on it. I have a wind up clock that I got back in the day that I leave by my bed as well. So I have 3 separate devices that have the alarms and they are all at different times. And like Andrew, I have my wind up alarm clock.
Is that the same one that you had when like we used to fish as kids?
No.
Oh.
No, it's a different one. But I have that thing and I put that across the room. Unfortunately for my wife, she has to wake up. I don't care. Just kidding. I do care, but she's chill. So I'll have that alarm go off and I run out of bed and I get it. So it also helps to have a chill partner. So when you inherently wake them up in the morning, they don't kill you. So that's always good.
One of the quick story about kind of arriving late for fishing. Well, I have one of two if you want to talk about, Jesse, is one is from our childhood of me not getting up for an alarm. And the other one is when I was fishing with Corey Reed last. We were going to fish together actually for our fishing meetup that you and I did. We got up there and I'm texting Corey or messaging him on Instagram like, hey, we're going to meet here. He's going to pick me up in the boat. Be great. And so I'm fishing from shore and he's fishing in front of like a bay. And I'm messaging him like, man, this guy's late. Like, I'm trying to message him. I don't have his phone number. I didn't get his phone number beforehand. So I'm messaging him just on Instagram. I'm like, where are you at? I'm over here. Like, I'm waiting for you. Ready? He's been trying to message me too, but the signal is so bad it wasn't showing up on either of our phones. And then I looked over and I just saw like his boat just the other side of the bridge. It's like, how long have you been here? It's like, I've been here for like 20 minutes. We were both there early waiting for the other person and like we were just out of sight line.
That's hilarious.
But the other one I was remembering is the reason why I asked about that alarm clock is years ago, I was maybe 13, 14 years old. And I went down, stayed at Jesse's place, and his dad at the time was working at GM, and he was like a shift worker. And we were setting the alarms to get up super early so we could go salmon fishing down at the harbor.
Yeah.
So Jesse, he's like, nice guy. He's like, okay, I'll give you my bed. He's like, I'll go sleep on the couch. I'm like, all right, like you don't have to, but that's fine. I have the alarm set. It's on the side table, so when it goes off, just make sure you shut it off quick because my dad's been working nights, so you don't want to wake him up. I'm like, okay, no problem. At that point in my life, if I would fall asleep with noise in the bed and like going on around me, noises apparently wouldn't wake me up. So when Jesse had his little fish tank running with the kind of aerator going, that little filter, water falling into the tank, I did not hear anything. And I woke up the next morning with Jesse like kneeling on my chest, shaking me, trying to wake me up.
I thought
he's
he
like,
died.
what's going on? He's like, the alarm's been going off. You didn't hear it? It's literally beside my head. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? He's like so mad because it woke him up being downstairs in the living room.
Yeah.
He had to like run upstairs, like violently shaking me awake.
Yeah. I was like, I don't want my dad to run out of his bedroom in his tidy whities. Anyway, I don't think he got up anyway.
I don't think so.
Andrew can sleep through anything. It's crazy. So set a lot of alarms. And if you're Andrew, set them and put them as close to your head as possible. And you probably still won't set up. Another thing from this article I was looking about how not to be late. I've never done this myself, but this may help you. Set your clock ahead 10 or 15 minutes. So you may not be the kind of person that completely sleeps in, but you may be, my buddy's going to pick me up at 5 a.m. and you're up at 4 o'clock, you're getting ready. And then, you finish all your stuff. You have a cup of coffee, you're sitting in front of the TV, watching some shows, and you just lose track of time. And I think whenever me and Andrew go fishing with each other and you're going to pick each other up, we always text each other in the morning. Like, are you awake? Yes, I'm awake. Okay, good. And then that fear that they're not awake is gone. And then you can kind of go on your day, getting everything ready. But you might be that kind of person that just loses track of time. And the other person's sitting in the driveway, they're texting you, you don't have your phone. And even being 5 minutes late can annoy the other person, right? Because like they're ready to go. They've been waiting for you. And even if you're 5 or 10 minutes late and they can't get a hold of you, it's aggravating, right? So if you do this, make sure you have maybe your clock set at 10 minutes ahead. So when you look down, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be outside at 6 o'clock. You run outside. Hey, now you're 10 minutes early. Great. So one more thing that you can do, and this is actually a funny idea. It's called a late fine. Now, if you have a friend that is constantly late, now I have to say, me and Andrew are good. Like, I don't think in our recent fishing past of like the last like many years, I don't think either of us has been late to the extent that would be annoying. But if you do have a friend that is always late, you can just tell them this. If you're picking them up and they're late, you can say, if you're late and you're not outside waiting on the curb or at the front porch, you have to buy me coffee and donuts in the morning, or you're paying the full amount of gas. Like if you normally split gas, like if you're not standing on the curb, your punishment is you're paying the full amount of gas. So you have the lunch, coffee, or gas fine for being late. And I tell you, they'll probably smarten up. If it happens once, they won't be late again. So that's a cool idea that you could do.
I feel like if the other person is driving, I think I would be politely 10 seconds late just so I'd be like, because I have to buy you coffee again. It's like they deserve coffee. They got up way earlier than you to drive out and pick you up.
Yeah, we're going to get into that for one of the next points. So the next one is the biggest one that everyone said is a botched net job. And we're going to kind of focus on large game fish like large northern pike, big walleye, big musky. That's the big ones right there. But also any fish, like if you catch a 6-pound bass and you botch the net job for your buddy, that's also terrifying. It's terrible. But botching net jobs, you ever wondered why people fail at scooping up fish? Like why are there so many botched net jobs? And obviously the main thing is inexperience. If you just hand a rookie a net and you're like, scoop the fish, they don't know what to do. It's kind of on you for, handing a net to a rookie. So if you're fishing with someone who has not netted a lot of fish, it's always good to give them these tips before you go fishing, because this could be the difference between, having a good fishing story or a terrible fishing story and actually catching that trophy fish. So I was looking at this article, and this guy was describing why it's so important for you to actually scoop that fish in. And he said this. He said the most heart-pounding moment of any fishing fight is the seconds just before it ends up in the net. Mm-hmm. That's definitely true. Why? Well, he said a lot can go wrong at this point, and if it goes wrong, it often is because of a faulty net job. Now, you'd have to think at this point, there's a lot of pressure on you. Like, haven't you fished with someone else? Me and Andrew are pretty chill, but when I'm fishing with someone else, there's a lot of pressure, especially if it's a good fish. Like you're more nervous probably than they are. because all that pressure to get that fish in the net is pretty much on you. Like some of it is to the actual angler. Like, if like say I was fishing with Mike from Water Wolf Lures a few weeks ago, and he had on a pretty good sized muskie. It was like 44-inch muskie, and the thing was nuts. It was like up on the side of the boat, and I was about to scoop it, and then it went straight under the boat, and we saw it on the other side jumping. I was like, holy smokes. Like, you kind of have to steer the fish in the right direction. That's on the angler for sure. But the net guy or the girl, they have the whole pressure of getting that fish into the net. And that, for a lot of people, it's terrifying. And if you botch it, it happens all the time. You feel terrible. You probably feel more terrible than the person that loses the fish, don't you?
Absolutely. Because you're
have
the
you
guy
ever
that lost
botched like a net job?
Like, I have.
Boo.
I have on smaller fish. I think the biggest one, we were salmon fishing, and it wasn't like really my fault 100%. The salmon tore through the net.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So the bait was just like left like on, because the hooks got caught in the side and the salmon thrashed. The hook fell out of the mouth and then like ripped right through the netting of the net. It was like, it's gone. And I just kind of stood there. I'm like, I'm like, sorry. So yeah, you feel terrible. I can't imagine doing that. Like if Jesse was reeling in his PB muskie and I ruined the net job. Oh
yeah, it's like, there goes my 52-incher. Dang it, Andrew. Go swim after it.
I would.
Now, I know if you're not someone who fishes for very large fish, like scooping up bass is a different story than scooping up a 5-foot-long muskie. So here are some tips. Maybe you're an experienced angler. You've been fishing for years, but maybe you're not someone that has had to scoop up a very large fish. So I'm going to tell you some tips here of how not to botch a net job and how to keep your friends and not enemies. So how to net a fish. This may sound very basic, but there are some techniques to doing this. Now, number one is to make sure, this isn't really on you, this is kind of on the boat in general, but make sure the net isn't too small. It's always better to have a net that's slightly too big than too small. You ever tried to, I know we've done it a few times just because we've caught some muskie when we're bass fishing and all we have is a little, like a deep bass net, and the muskie's like folded in half of the net. That's not what you want to do, because we've had it even on a bigger muskie net where you have a muskie in the net and it's not a deep bag, and the muskie starts like thrashing around in the net and it almost flies out and swims away. You're like, oh no. So having a nice big net with a deep bag, that's what you want if you can get away with it. Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind, like we have a very large muskie net with a deep bag. It's like a 4-foot deep bag, which means that's how much netting goes down. So when you're scooping up a fish, is to have the netting in your hand. So gather the bag of the net when netting a fish. The long bag, the reason you want to do that is because this long bag of the net in the water, it produces a lot of drag in the water. So especially if you have a large musky net, it's heavy enough. Like it's a big metal net with a big mesh, and the mesh itself is heavy. And then getting that wet in the water and trying to swing it through the water, there's a lot of drag. It's like pulling a strainer through the water. So hold the bag in your hand, not super tight. You don't want it to be like a legit tennis racket when you're trying to scoop the fish up. Have it a little loose, have the bag in your hand. Once you get the fish head first into the net, you let go of the netting and the fish will basically go into the net, into the depths of the bag, and then you can pull up and the fish will go down to the bottom, and that thing is generally not going to get out.
Another good reason to do that is if you have the net, say, sitting at the water's edge and the netting is hanging down that 4 feet. If that fish approaches and then, gets that last minute burst of energy for that, it might be a short run, but it just dips down, dives down. It can get those hooks fouled up on the netting that's just hanging down. So another reason to hold it, just, hook your finger in the bottom of the net or something like that. Just so that it is all more contained into a more compact zone. So there's less risk of it tangling on the hooks.
Yeah. And you have to think too, like netting can get caught on things. So if you're just like, sometimes, like I said, a muskie could be on this side of the boat and then shoot under to the other side. You have to be able to get that net to the other side of the boat quick. You don't want it to be like dangling down and hooked onto like, oh, it hooked on my fish finder mount, or oh, it hooked into this lure that was on the ground. Like you don't want the netting to be hooked into anything because that can ruin you. One time I was muskie fishing, just a quick story, and my battery box, it has like, the thumb screws where the terminals go on, and I had a muskie on. It wasn't a huge one, but it was a muskie. And my net got stuck around one of the terminals and I couldn't get it out, and I lost that fish because I couldn't get my net out in time. So now what I do is actually have like a waterproof boat motor cover. It's the smallest one I could find, and I put it over the battery box so that there's no, nothing that can catch onto the netting. So that's one thing I did. Will it happen again? I don't know, but now I know that it won't. So That's one thing. Another thing that you should never do, and I see this is probably the main thing you see people do, is they take random stabs at the fish. Like the fish is not ready yet. Sometimes, again, granted, sometimes you have to take a wild stab at a fish. If it's hooked lightly and you know that if it gets past you, it's going to shake the hook, then by all means, take a random stab. But generally speaking, if it's hooked good especially, don't take a random stab at the fish. That often causes the fish to like panic and just like swim off fast the other way. And if the angler doesn't have like the line tightness down, that could like either snap their line or rip the hook straight out of the fish's mouth. So don't be random and crazy. Don't stab it. So what you should do instead, fast movements risk bumping the fish or even bumping the line, which can cause the lure to pop out of its mouth. And you never want to put a fish in a net tail first. I know that's probably the main thing that most people say is head first. They'll see a fish swimming and it's kind of going one way and they're scooping the net after it tail first. And the fish, it's like, I can just swim away. You know, like they just go away from the net. You're never going to catch a fish swimming away. They're fast. Like especially with their big musky net, right? So you always have to try to get it head first. And what happens is if you do eventually get that in, they're not dumb. They see the net. But eventually if you can trick them into swimming into the net, they swim into the depth of the net, you lift up and they're caught. It sounds simple, getting a fish into a net, but there's a lot of technique to it. And yes, you may botch a few jobs, but if you're in my boat and we're musky fishing, don't botch it up because I'm going to be mad. Actually, most of the people that were complaining about botched net jobs, they're musky guys. Yeah. So this must be a big problem. Actually, me and Andrew are pretty good. Mm-hmm. I don't think we've ever botched a musky job ourselves. Again, we don't catch a lot of them, but whenever we do catch one, generally it gets in the net.
And another thing with it too is like with musky fishing, there's you have to remember that long fish, especially when they're coming into the net, even if you have a big open net, by the time the head, like the tail may not be into the net yet, but the line is hitting the edge of the net. And so it'll actually, the tension on that line will start to turn the head and start coming out of the net, and then you might panic. So one of the things you can do is, as the angler, there is some onus on the person who's fighting the fish themselves too, is if you have a big fish like that, just when the head's coming in, just before the line starts hitting that hoop, you can actually drop your rod a bit, give it a bit of slack that doesn't, pull the head up as that line touches against that hoop. So it's not give it complete slack, but just make sure it's not going to be, pulling against it. And another thing too, that even with Jesse and I, like you were saying, you don't want to take wild stabs at a fish. But I remember there's been some stories of us catching like some good bass, and we've had to but again, the onus is on at that point is up to the angler to say, hey, it's not hooked well. And Jesse and I will do this. It's not hooked well. Net it as soon as you can. If I'm not given that command, I will not wildly start stabbing at a fish that Jesse's fighting. But if he's like, hey, there's like one hook point of the back treble on like the corner of its mouth, like I'd net this as soon as you can, then yeah, I'll lean over that extra bit, whatever I have to do, try and get that fish in the net. And there's been a few times where that hook pops and like you still net the fish. It's like, yes.
Yes. The best is when it gets off and then as you pull up, the fish goes into the net. You're like, oh, yeah, it's amazing. Speaking of musky fishing, I thought we could just go on a slight tangent here. We actually got some new musky lures. I thought we could talk about this quick. So we went to Sail the other day. I like going into Sail because it's so close to our house too. Mm-hmm. So like it's close to Andrew's house and it's close to my work. So we end up going in there all the time. So we have a musky trip this weekend. We're really excited about, and we're looking around for musky lures and Sail had the ones we wanted. So we went in there. We're actually fishing a lake this weekend that is very clear. It's got a lot of nice steep break lines, not a lot of weeds. It's more like a shield lake, a lot of rock. So we are actually going to be doing a lot of trolling. So I said to Andrew, I'm like, again, we don't do a lot of trolling for musky because we fish a lot of lakes that have a lot of weeds and all that stuff. And we usually don't, troll. But Andrew loves trolling. So I was like, you know what? Let's go trolling this weekend. Let's see if we can catch a musky trolling. And he was like, yeah, I don't really have a lot of trolling lures. We don't really have a lot. Like how many trolling lures do you have? One or two?
Yeah. I'm actually surprised by the amount of lures I have, though, that I've accumulated over the past 3 years.
Yeah, it happens. But for me, a lot of the lures that I buy for musky, they're not trolling lures because we don't troll. So what we did is we asked we did a post on Instagram. We said like, hey, what are some of your favorite trolling lures under $100? I know like some people spend hundreds of dollars on lures. That's, again, we don't troll enough to do that. Maybe one day. And a lot of people said one lure and they said the Believer, which is one of the most popular old school fish catching machines ever. And in fact, it's rated one of the top 10 musky lures of all time. So I said to Andrew, like, let's get some Believers. Let's get some big Believers. Like, I want those big ones. I actually have an 8-inch already, but I'm like, let's get the big 10-inch ones. Like, I know they also have a big 13-inch, but we decided to get the jointed ones. because they have a really crazy erratic action. We're going to do some trolling. I'm really excited. So we were looking around and Sale had a huge selection of believers. 8-inch, 10, or was it 10-inch? 8-inch, 10-inch, jointed, all the colors. We went in there and I was surprised. They had like half a shelf full of big musky cranks of just believers. Plus they had a whole bunch of Jakes, which is another very popular musky trolling lure. 8-inch, 10-inch, whole bunch of, like the Joe Booker, depth raiders, all that stuff. So they do have a very good selection of musky lures. I was pretty happy because we went in there and we were trying to decide what color to get. It was hard to pick what color. And it's funny because we both picked the same color. But yeah, which one did you get?
So I got it's the 10-inch jointed believer. And I'm going to try not to move this around too much just because the noise this thing makes is nuts. So I'll demonstrate that.
It's going to call in the fatties.
Yeah, so it's I don't know what you call it. It's a sunburst color, some big orange belly, yellow on the sides with reflective stickers. And it's a black line on top. But mine is like the standard jointed with three treble hooks on it. But this thing, yeah, it has a 2 hookup points for the nose to change the diving depth. But this thing is just going to have a wicked wobble in the water, as the believers do. But the jointed is just is nuts. And again, to have rattles and all that stuff and shine, there's no reason to not suspect it to be a fish catching machine.
Yeah, it's going to call in the fish from a long distance away. And I think one of the research I've done, and from the people I talked to recently about getting believers, they have a really good walk. When you're trolling them or reeling them in, they don't just come in straight. They walk to the side, back and forth. And apparently when you're trolling them, they walk several feet each direction. So you're covering like a big swath of water, right? Again, so Andrew got the jointed. I have a few straight models already, but I hadn't never bought a jointed one ever. So I decided to get the jointed. And if you follow us on Instagram, you'll know that I'm a sucker for a curly tail. I love the big, any musky lure that has a curly tail or some kind of twister tail on the end. I'm like, oh yeah, like that. So I actually got the same color as Andrew because I wanted something gold, something with a little bit of flash and shine to it. But again, to describe it, like Andrew said, it's gold on the side. It's got fluorescent orange underneath. It's got a big fluorescent orange twister tail. That's like from an 8 or 9 inch grub. It's just big. And again, big rattles. It's going to have a crazy action. We're going to be trolling these. We probably won't troll these at the same time unless they start slamming believers. Then we'll have 2 of them out. But it's good to have, some confidence baits that people have told us how well these work and how effective they are. So we kind of have some secondhand confidence here. So we're excited to try these, not just this weekend, but throughout this fall. We have a bunch of trips planned. So I'm excited for that. And again, there was quite a selection at Sale. I'm almost tempted to go back and pick up another color because there was a few colors that I really wanted, right? Sale had a really good selection. Another lure that I'll show you quick that I got at Sale was, like I mentioned, they have a really good selection of the Joe Booker products, which, if you know, that's a big musky brand. It's probably one of the bigger, musky brands that have been around for a long time. And I actually got a depth raider. This is an 8-inch. This is a classic. These have been around for decades. It's just an 8-inch jerkbait. This one is actually the suspending model. So I was saying, Andrew, this is actually the biggest jerkbait that I own now, because this is just like a bass jerkbait. You reel it down and it just suspends, just like you're fishing an X-Wrap or something like that. But it's got 3 big hooks on it. This is just a regular sucker pattern. And I was thinking this is going to be cool fishing around rock reefs and stuff like that we're going to go and do this weekend. So that's cool. It has a good rattle to it too. It's going to attract the fish. It's not a giant lure, so it's kind of a great lure that anyone can chuck. You don't need a massive rod for this. It's only like 3 ounces or something like that. And then one more lure I'll show you I picked up at Sale. I kind of went a little nuts. I didn't buy this one the other day, but I bought this one before. This is just the classic bulldog. They actually have a decent selection of bulldogs. This color I was looking for everywhere, and Sale had it. It's the classic walleye color with the bright orange tail. This isn't a big one. This is the regular bulldog. I do have a few larger mag dogs too, so I'm excited to try those out. We're going to be chucking a little bit of everything, aren't we, Andrew?
Oh, absolutely. I have so much stuff I'm going to bring. It's going to be interesting to see what 3 lures I choose to throw on this trip.
Yeah.
Where I'm bringing 40 baits.
Oh yeah, we'll bring everything, because you never know what the conditions are going to be like, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to link all these below if you want to check out them on the Sale website. They have a huge selection, like I said. Again, we love buying fishing lures, and we went into Sale and we spent too much money. It just happens. I mean,
and sometimes you like using fishing lures, but we really like buying fishing lures.
And I'll tell you one more thing. I'll just mention one more thing quick, because this is kind of like a mini review. One thing that you can get at Sale. This is what we got. We got the new Scotty 139 smartphone holder. So this is actually, if you're listening to this is a smartphone holder. It's very secure. it tightens down and locks. So you can put your smartphone, like your iPhone or whatever phone you have, and it basically goes right onto like a little ball mount, and then you can hook it into your regular Scotty mounts, or it has a rail adapter included. These things, I haven't used it yet, but we're playing around with the one at sale, and they're made in Canada, like everything else Scotty makes, and it appears to be super heavy duty. So this is the kind of thing where we're going to have Navionics on the boat, so we can put our phone in there, tighten it down, not have to worry about our iPhone fluttering down into the lake and a muskie coming up and eating it. I'm excited to try that. We're going to try it this weekend, and we'll keep you guys posted, let you know if it's worth the money. We're just like
regular programming.
This little tangent where we spent too much money at the fishing store. Who would have thought that we would run into sale and spend millions of dollars? Well, we do it all the time. What can I say?
And we're going to have to move this along pretty quick to finish all 10 of these points.
Yeah, well, I kept the more annoying points at the first, so we'd rant about them a bit. So the next point is about breaking your partner's gear. Have you ever had that, Andrew?
I've had some of my gear broken. I've been there when your gear has been broken, but so far I don't think I've been the one to break it. We've broken stuff in front of each other, but I don't think, thankfully, we haven't broken each other's stuff.
Yeah, it's always bad when you break your own gear, but it's always worse when you break someone else's gear, mostly rods. I thought we could cover some of the ground rules about borrowing gear. Do you have any ground rules? Like, say, like I have all my rods out. Do you feel comfortable just grabbing one of my rods and fishing it?
As good of friends we are, I still be like, hey, like, can I try that? Like, oftentimes if we get a new rod, we'll be like, hey, you should try this. And we'll literally hand it to the other person to try. There may be times where, like, we'll have a Senko rod in the boat. We only have one, let's say, that's rigged up with the Senko or with a stick bait. And, you know, oftentimes you'll be the one to bring that. And so you'll say, hey, like, this is our follow-up bait. If we need it, you know, feel free to grab it. But that rule only applies to that rod. So even now, I don't like to risk grabbing your stuff without explicit permission to do so.
Yeah. And that's kind of like a rule that we have because, you know, me and Andrew have different tastes in rod expenses. So like Andrew might feel uncomfortable using like, you know, my X Pride because if it snaps, you know, he has to buy me a $400 rod. But I guess it goes when you're fishing with your fishing buddy, cover the ground rules. Just be like, listen, I don't want to sound like a wiener here, but don't touch my stuff. Like I spend a lot of money on it. No offense. You can't just pick it up and just like fish it. Now, here's the thing. Like say like, again, like we have a Senko rod on the board, or like say like the fish blows up on your bait and you're like, oh, here, grab my flipping stick, chuck a jig in there. I don't care about that. Me and Andrew are pretty chill with our gear. So with your fishing buddy, make sure you have ground rules so that they know. And they don't just, some people just are oblivious. Oh, let me use your $400 rod or $200 or even $50 rod, like whatever. And you're cringing the whole time because you know how they do terrible things to rods.
I've always wanted to try a bait caster. Let me see that. Boom.
Yeah. Is that your new spinnerbait rod? You see them just poking into the water to get a snag out. You're like, ah. Yeah. So the other thing is you have to have ground rules of if there is a boring rule, who is responsible for it if it breaks? And I'm not talking like a defect break, but I'm talking like if you do something stupid and break my rod, what is the rule here? The rule for me is, I would say to Andrew, if you break something, you have to buy me a new one. That's the rule. If you don't think that's a good deal, then don't borrow it. And so far, we haven't broken anything. So that's
or
at least
good. I fix it just enough so it breaks the next time Jesse uses it.
Exactly. And say you have like, say a St. Croix rod or something with a warranty where it's like, you know what, you get a new rod, but it's, you know, $120. Yeah, I'm not going to make you go to the store and buy me a brand new rod, but you can cover the warranty. But so far, it hasn't happened to us. Now, I thought I could just cover briefly why rods break, because I've worked at several fishing stores. People break rods all the time for stupid reasons, and they always blame the fishing rod. And they'll tell me how it broke, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you did it. It was your fault. It was not the rod's fault. Here's the thing. If you break a rod, the first time you use it, or within the first few days that you use it, the first hook set, that's when a defect is going to snap your rod. Like I bought a brand new Musky rod one time, and on the first cast, it broke in half. When it loaded up the lure and I cast it, it snapped right in the middle. That's what you call a defect. Something was wrong with that blank. It was defective. I hadn't even caught a fish on it yet. If you're going to catch or use a rod and it breaks the first few times you're going to use it, that's probably a defect. But if you've had the rod for like 3 years and it breaks in the middle, that's probably something that happened to the rod when you owned it. That's not the rod's fault. That's your fault. But why do rods break? I'd say the main thing that happens is high sticking. Now, you may think high sticking, what's that? Isn't that a hockey thing? When someone like hits someone with a stick really high? I don't know. I don't watch hockey. But high sticking when you're fishing is when you're raising the rod well loaded. So say you have a fish on, or you have a snag and the rod has a lot of, flex in it, and you raise it at such an angle that it places the majority of the force on the tip of the rod. So like the top quarter of the rod is flexed in a way that it's not supposed to flex at. Rods are supposed to flex more at like a 45-degree angle, not just like the tip bent up like a weird hook. That's why tips snap. And most of the time when people would bring in rods, it's usually the tip that is snapped. And that's literally why. It's because people were high sticking. And usually when that happens is when they don't know how to boat flip a bass, or when they're setting the hook, or when they have a snag and they're just reefing on the rod back and it's like, and the tip snaps off. That was avoidable. That was your fault. So if you do that, don't get mad. If you borrow someone's rod, don't do that. You can do it with your own stuff or with an ugly stick. That's fine. They probably won't break.
Or if you want to unhook that snag, so you do that cool thing you saw on TikTok and you undo the reel seat and you hold your reel and you send your rod flying down to that snag. That's
if
your
I saw
fault.
Andrew doing that, I'd be so mad. Another thing that you don't want to do is say your buddy loans you a rod and he's like, oh, borrow this rod because I know your rod broke or something. Don't overrate or put line that's way higher than the rating of the rod. So like, oh, it's a medium bait casting rod and I put 65-pound braid on it. You're probably going to break the rod because it's not rated for that much. So that is with the whole rod thing. Don't break your buddy's rods. That is a bad idea. So the next point is about borrowing and losing lures. Now, like with me and Andrew, we bring a lot of tackle fishing, and generally if like there's a hot bite and I'm like, Andrew, like they're hitting this lure. I have an extra one. He doesn't have one. I have no problem being like, take this other one. But what happens when you snag and you lose that lure? Do you get to steal your lure back from your buddy? I say yes. It's your lure. You bought it. You were prepared. The other person wasn't. That's my thought. You have to ask yourself this. Should your fishing buddy have full access to your tackle box? What do you think? Are you thinking yes?
No.
You're thinking no? You're thinking no. I agree
Absolutely
with that.
No. And I'll tell you why for me is I have some expensive custom baits, but I also have, which again, those I'll let you use, but I have rules. You got to use a leader when you use them and stuff like that, right? I don't want to be bitten off. But for stuff where it's like vintage or old or stuff that has sentimental value, like if you're like, oh, I'm going to use this old shad wrap, I'm like, that's the first lure that I ever bought that I keep in my tackle box. I don't fish with it. It just sits there on purpose. Don't use it.
And most people don't have like a full selection of vintage lures in their box. But the way I feel is like, I buy a lot of tackle. I buy more than I need. And I feel though, if I'm buying lures, spending extra money to upgrade the hooks, buying a tackle box, put them in, I have a lot invested in being prepared. And then you fish with someone that's not. And they're like, oh, I brought 4 lures and they have rusty hooks on them and they're not catching fish. And then they're like, oh, can I borrow your lure? I feel like you should be like, no, like I'm the one that's prepared. You're not. Why should I give you my advantages? Like, I don't know. I sound like I'm being like a bit of a wiener there, but if you have a friend who's like a mooch and he's just like, oh, it's fine. I'll just get all my stuff from my buddy. You can tell why that would be annoying for your fishing buddy to be like, oh, I have to make sure I have enough for this guy too. And just adding expense and stress to that. And you just see them like, oh, and they're always picking the best lure. Oh, the mega bass, I'll use that. Sick. It's like that $35 lure. Yeah, no problem. You can borrow that. It didn't cost you a dime, right? So make sure you have ground rules with your fishing buddy. So I have some rules here for fishing. So make sure that you have these rules if your buddy wants to go through your box. Number 1, you have to ask for JDM usage. So if it's an expensive lure, don't just pick it up and use it. You got to ask. Be like, hey, can I borrow a lure? Yeah, you can use that Husky jerk. You can't use the mega bass unless I say so because it costs 3 times as much. So number 1, ask for JDM. Number 2 is trade lures. So say you snag a lure or something like that, you have to give them another lure, a comparable lure, and they get to pick it out of your box to a certain extent. Number 3, this is kind of a rule that me and Andrew have always had, and thankfully it has not had to be paid out yet. And the rule is, if you snag your fishing buddy, they get to keep the lure. At the very least, they get to keep the lure. But if they're snagged in the face or the head, they get to keep the lure and pick any lure they want out of your box. It doesn't matter how expensive. It could be like $100 bait. If they snag you in the face or the head, they get the lure that's in their face and their head after it's taken out. And then they as well get to pick something from your box for the inconvenience. I think that's a pretty fair rule, don't you, Andrew?
I agree.
And so far, we haven't had to deal with it. I'm very happy that we haven't had to deal with that.
Jesse's just waiting for the day, though. He's like, I'm going to get Andrew for like $400.
Yeah, he's casting. I'm just like swinging my head so that I'll get snagged. I'm like, ooh, Hashimoto. All right, the next point is, this is one thing that could be very annoying, is you have a buddy who's a complete cheapskate. just some cheapskate mooch you got. And how could they be a cheapskate? Well, you have to think, if you're going to meet at the lake and go on your buddy's boat, or maybe your buddy picks you up and you drive up to the lake, make sure you do these things. A, buy them coffee. Buy them coffee, donuts, breakfast. Buy them a breakfast every time. Don't ask them if they want coffee. Tell them you're buying them coffee. At the very least, you should be buying them breakfast or lunch. Number 2, gas money every single time. I know like a lot of buddies would be like, oh, we're buddies, don't worry about it. Gas ain't cheap. Me and Andrew, what we do is every time we go driving, we fill up before, and on the way back, we fill up again. Like, oh, $40, okay, $20 each, right? Mm-hmm. Plus, Andrew buys me 8 coffees, so that works out. What about, Andrew, but if you use a bunch of your buddies' baits?
Even that, like if there's been times where, that's what's biting and we go through 3 packs of whatever Jesse brought. Usually it's me using his soft plastics, and he is generous with them. But at some point, I absolutely have to replace them. But, okay, I'll make sure I find those, those white goat toads at sale. The next time I'm there, I'll make sure I go find them. I'll buy another pack because I used all of yours,
Yeah. Make them sign a contract with a picture of the baits they use, and they have to sign it. Just kidding. The last etiquette that I have, and again, it's going to depend on your relationship with your buddy, but it's nice to be fair so you don't have any resentment, is if your buddy is the boat that he's either paying for or he paid a lot of money for and he's towing it with his truck, not only should you pay for gas, but you should pay for the boat launch if there's ever a boat launch fee. If it's a $20 boat launch, just be like, buddy, I got the boat launch. Don't worry about it. You brought the boat, you bought the truck, you picked me up. Be fair. If you were the guy with the boat, you'd realize how much money it costs to run a boat. You would be not sneezing at all at spending $20 at a boat launch. So that's another thing. The next one is kind of a grosser one. Why don't you handle this one? Bathroom stops.
There have been many a time where we have had to put fishing on hold when nature gives me a call. I remember there's one time Jess and I were paddling up. We were camping in Algonquin Park. We're paddling to the site. And I'm just like, Jesse, like we gotta pull to the side. And he's like, we're in the middle of the big basin. We're another hour away. He's like, why? I'm like, Jesse, we need to pull to the side now. He's like, can you wait? No. So, we pull into shore, and I always have my little toiletries bag accessible. And yeah, I had to wander off and do that. And Jesse had to wait for me.
I never saw a man hobble so fast into the woods.
It has happened. Now, some of the things that I would recommend is always be prepared. Because if you're fishing for 12 hours in the water, you're going to have to go at some point. Maybe. If you have a healthy movement at all, you're going to be going at some point. Jesse's like, I've been 3 days and I'm still going strong.
See, here's the thing. That's not an issue for me. I can go like a 12
before and then you go after.
Yeah. But again, you may have some issues, not everyone's the same. But yeah, if you do have those issues, just
make sure you're prepared. So for example, in my boat, I have a small little orange bucket. It has some toilet paper in a freezer bag, like a Ziploc bag. It has some hand sanitizer and a little shovel so I can dig holes on shore. I also have some plastic liners. So if we're in the middle of the lake and I have to go, I have liners that I can use. I can line a little bucket and go. I have emergency only use. Now I haven't had to do it literally in the boat yet, thank goodness. But hey, guys who fish major tournaments, they have to go in their boat sometimes. It's something that may occur, so I like to be prepared for it. Thankfully, like I said, hasn't happened. I got some doozy stories we're not getting into on this podcast. People keep saying, we don't want to hear it. And only one guy who's like a little creepo, he's like, I want to hear it. And we just keep ignoring him. So
yeah. Sorry, creepo. One thing to keep in mind, if you do have to go to the bathroom, number 1, on the boat, keep safety in mind. Hundreds of people drowned every year in Canada in boating accidents, and some of those involve falling in the water when trying to go to the bathroom. So if you do have to go, make sure you keep safety in mind when you do so.
Two words will save lives. Transfer cup.
I was going to say.
Have a cup. And you just transfer that now outside the boat without standing on the side of your gunnel.
Yeah. It's actually, especially in a canoe, a Gatorade container is your best friend. Wide mouth. Or, in Andrew's case, a Coke bottle, right? Anyway, so the next point is being a useless launch loser. So me and Andrew have it pretty dialed. When we get to the launch, we're ready. We're not like right in front of the launch, packing our stuff up. Like we're ready to go. All of our gear's ready. Boat plugs in. I'm in the boat. He's in the vehicle, backs up. I push off. He parks the trailer. I pick him up. Boo, we're flying down the lake. That's not always the case. I see a lot of people, and it's oftentimes when they're fishing with like maybe one of their family members that doesn't fish a lot, or one of their buddies who just, oh, I'll go fishing with you, and they don't know anything. And that launch takes forever, and you're just waiting. And it seems like the guy's, it's worse off than if he's launching it himself. He's this other guy just not knowing what to do and wandering around. It's like, oh my goodness. So here's 3 tips to help you be more efficient if you are with a buddy with a boat. Number 1 is be ready to help. Don't just be that guy like, oh, you want me to sit in the boat? It's like, no, I need to get this stuff ready and I need to do this and this. Just be ready to help. Ask, like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to hold this? Where do you want me to do? You want me to put this here? Just be ready to help, be observant, be like a good apprentice, just ready to help, ready to learn. The next thing to do is listen to their instructions. Don't try to, give them suggestions on how to do it. This is their boat. They probably have launched it many, many, many times. They have a certain way. Like even when I put my canoe on top of my car, I have a certain way of doing it, and I put the straps on a certain way. When someone tries to help me, I end up just taking it off and doing it again. Like, I don't trust that. I want to do it a certain way. Listen to their instructions and do exactly that. Don't try to like just do your own thing, because sketchy stuff can happen. You don't want that to happen at the boat launch. That's sketchy. And the third thing is be observant. Always have your head on a swivel. You never know what's going to happen if, maybe another boat's coming in quick, or someone's trying to like drive up and launch their boat quick and they don't see you. Like, always have your head on a swivel so you can, yell to your buddy if something weird's happening, or like, oh, the boat plug's not in. Like, make sure you're paying attention. It's like, oh, it's fine. Keep going. The boat's filling with water. Keep going. You're good. So don't be a loser, and don't waste time, because that annoys us. Me and Andrew are right ahead of those guys waiting to launch and going, oh man, look at these rookies, man. So don't be useless. I got to get a shirt that just says that. Don't be useless. That'd be good. We're going to cover 2 more. These are just basic ones, but this could annoy you so much. This is a little bit of an Andrew thing. So not packing food. So sometimes we'll go on trips. And like for me, again, we're getting a little older. We're in our 30s now. We used to be able to fish and just literally have like a cup of coffee and a bottle of water and all day and be like, we're fine. Now I'm just like, no, I need to eat food, or else I start going insane. So I always have like a nice little cooler, and I have a bunch of food. I have a bunch of cold drinks. We have like a big water bottle, snacks throughout the day, all that stuff. And sometimes I'll be fishing with Andrew and he's like, oh, I didn't pack any food. I'm like, what are you going to eat? And he's like, I'll eat later on the way home. I'm like, it's 5 a.m. and we're leaving here at 10 p.m. Like, he goes all day without eating food. And then the thing that annoys me is I don't care. I don't care if he eats food or not. But then I feel guilty eating my food, because I'm just like eating like this beautiful big sandwich, and he's just looking at me like, eh. So I'm just like, I'm annoyed that he didn't pack food, because now I feel guilty eating my food. So make sure you pack food, and maybe you can pack food for the guy within the boat. Be like, hey, that's another thing you can be good at. I'll bring lunch, right? That could be cool. But the other thing to do etiquette wise, don't pack tuna salad. That's disgusting. No one wants that on the water. Pack a good lunch.
All right. Egg salad only. I'll remember.
Yeah. Another thing that you really need to bring, which can annoy again, and I think it's that secondhand annoyance, is like a raincoat. So like, say you're out fishing and you have a raincoat, but your buddy doesn't have one, and it starts raining. You're like, well, I don't care. I'm in a raincoat. I'm fine. I'm going to fish all day. And your buddy's just soaking wet, and it's like cold rain in the fall. And you feel awkward because you're like, like now we got to go back. He's going to get sick. Oh man, that idiot, like that is another thing. So just make sure you have the essentials for a good day fishing. You have your food, you have enough water. I know like there's been a few days where it was really hot and we didn't pack enough water, and we were like, oh my goodness, but make sure you have everything you need, because when you're fishing, you want to enjoy yourself. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to get sunstroke. You don't want to get a cold or hypothermia, anything like that. So make sure you pack everything. Now, the last one, I have a little story about this, is line crossing. One thing that it can annoy your fishing buddy is crossing their line, which basically means like someone casts somewhere and then the other person casts their line over their line. So when they reel in it, it snags their line and everything gets tangled. Now, me and Andrew, again, we've been fishing with each other for a long time. And at the beginning, when we were younger, our casts were pretty terrible. I'd say we probably got more than a few tangles over the years.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember any terrible ones per se, but
there have been a few who've had to cut the line though. Like, there have been.
Here's the thing. Sometimes it happens. You got wind, you got currents, you got fish jumping.
Or using a spoon and you're like, oh, could you rip it in so it doesn't get tangled, and that just spins it around the other line.
Yeah. So make sure, especially if you're with a boater and you're the co-angler, you're the guest, and your buddy's boat, they get first crack at where they want to cast first. Front boat advantage, right? They get to cast where they want, and then you have to cast around them. You don't want to cast, I'd say, within 10 feet of them, generally. Like, that's their area. Now, the story that me and Andrew have been doing for so long. I don't know when it started. We have this thing called the 6 foot rule? 4 foot rule. Every time Andrew casts, I will specifically, just to annoy him, cast exactly where he is. So my lure lands right beside his lure. And I'll be like, 4 foot rule. I have to cast within 4 feet of his lure. And my reasoning is, if a fish was going to eat his lure, now it's going to swim up and grab mine because mine's a better lure. Has it ever happened? A few times, yeah. But unless you're good at casting and you're not going to cross the line, I do not recommend the 4 foot rule. Have some etiquette when you're casting around. And another thing you can do is be observant, obviously. Like, watch where they're casting. Don't just cast and be like, oh, where's your line? It's like, well, you should have known that before you cast there, pal. Now, you're probably going to get a big tangle. But one thing you can do is call spots. Now, we're going to get into this in another podcast. I was actually talking to the guys I went musky fishing with last month, Will and Jeremy, about the front boat advantage. What are your thoughts on that?
Front boat advantage is definitely a real thing. And again, when you have the front boat, like, you get first crack at all those shots. You're pushing into a bay. I get to be the first one to cast into the front of that bay or the back edge of it, go around a point or around structure. You get to be that guy that makes that first cast right along the length of that fallen tree or whatnot. So there are some definite advantages to being in the front of the boat, because it cuts out, at least 30% of your casting range where the boat's heading for the guy in the back. Even if you are casting forward, you can't cast directly at the back of the guy's head unless you want to give up your lure.
So there is definitely a front boat advantage. A lot of people are like, no, there's not really. It doesn't really matter. But there is. The guy in the front, he gets first crack at most of the casts, and he gets to position the boat where he wants. Even subconsciously, they might do that. But they also get to decide where they're fishing. Like, the guy in the, sometimes Andrew will be trolling along and I'll be like, if it was me, I would have went in there, So, it's their boat. They get to decide where to go. Obviously, if you're your buddies, you could be like, oh, you mind if we go in there? And Andrew doesn't care. He's like, yeah, let's go in. Call out spots. That's the next point I want to say. Like, sometimes Andrew knows he has front boat advantage, but we'll call spots and we're fair. Andrew will be like, okay, I'm going to hit this log. That next one up there, that's your spot. I'm not going to cast at it. I'm going to go past it. And then I'll cast there in the back of the boat. He's not going to smash if we're going up a little river, he's not going to smash every single fish. I'm going to catch at least a few in the back. So make sure if you're the boater, I know it's your boat, but have a little compassion for the poor sap in the back that doesn't own a boat.
One of the things that I'll actually do is oftentimes Jess and I will fish shoreline structures, or going along, trolling motors on 3 or 4, and we're just cooking along the side of this bay or the shoreline, and I'm casting at stuff, and Jesse and I, we're at the point now when we're fishing that we each, we would be casting the exact same spots. We see I prefer that spot over, the other 30 feet of this bank. I want to cast there. And we have the same mindset on most of those spots. So what I'll do is, as we're going along, I will sometimes, if I'm on the front of the boat, I'll be hitting, like Jesse said, I'll skip some spots. Even if I don't mention it to him, I'll skip some. But the guy in the back, it's your job. And I did that for a long time too, and Jesse was in the front of the boat or whatnot. I would be the guy, and I would look to see where Jesse was casting, and then you think, okay, where are the spots that he didn't hit? Because if you're moving along at a pace, you're not going to be able to hit every single one that you want. He might fish the left side of that tree, but as you go by, I can fish the other side because he didn't have time to cast at it. So things like that, take note of where the lead angler or the front boat angler has casted, and then you'll have a better success rate of being able to pick up. They might be secondary spots, but they're still better than the other 30 feet of the bank.
Yeah. So be observant, keep an eye out. And again, if you fish with someone a lot, it may be hard if you're just, it's a guy you're taking out once a year. You may not be able to pick up on their fishing habits and all that stuff. Me and Andrew have been fishing together for more than 20 years. So I know what spots Andrew's going to take. I know for 100. I'm like, Andrew's going to fish that. Because we like the same spots, but also he uses different lures than me. So some spots he'll be like, listen, this tree is too gnarled up for me. I know you have a flipping jig on. You take this one. I'll get this other hole in the lily pad. So it's good. So be observant, call spots, and position the boat fairly so that both people have, no reason to be mad at each other. So these were 10 points of things that could drive you absolutely insane when you're fishing. How many do you identify with, Andrew?
Most. Definitely most. Again, on being on both sides of having done it and having had it done to me.
Definitely. So I thought we could end this episode with not only the quote of the week, but first, I actually have a message. This is actually pretty cool. So I got this guy named Joel. He sent us a message on Instagram. He said, Jesse and Andrew, I have to thank you both. I'm from the GTA, have only been fishing for 1 year. I'm 30, but just decided to learn how to fish. I found your podcast through researching and collecting info on local fishing. Watched both salmon podcasts and decided to build up the courage to try, followed all your tips, and caught a Chinook on my very first day targeting them on a J13 Fire Tiger. Thank you both so much. Sincerely, Joel. And he sent us a picture, a very nice fish, big hen. He told me it was a very good fight. So that's the kind of message we love, guys that are just getting into fishing. And, you know, like maybe something like bass fishing is more normal and they're like, get the courage to go salmon fishing. It's something new. It's something exciting. It's something that I know when we post a lot of our salmon pictures, people are like, wow, one day I'd love to do that. Make that day now. Like it's something different. It's not difficult. Anyone in Ontario, if you love fishing, that's all you need. You just need to love fishing. That's it. And you can go and you can catch almost any species in Ontario. It just takes a little bit of research. And hey, you know, you learn a bit from our podcast, but there's so much information out there. I'm glad that some people are not only enjoying the podcast, but also learning from it and helping them catch fish. So if you have similar thanks like this or like experiences where you learn something from the podcast and help you catch fish, definitely let us know. So we're going to have this podcast with the quote of the week. Handle that. We have Andrew.
If you aren't the guy that owns the boat, buy him coffee or he'll throw you in and hope you float.